Hi, I'm Jennifer Lang, Director of Digital News and Audience Engagement at WFAE. On behalf of all of us at WFAE, welcome to the Charlotte Podcast Festival pop-up. We've got a great lineup of speakers this week, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot. Please ask questions. This festival is a place for you to learn. Put your questions in the Q&A in the Zoom at the bottom. You'll find this near the bottom of your screen. Feel free to introduce yourself and talk with other guests in the chat. Remember, WFAE's ability to bring you these free festival sessions come from listener support. Please donate any amount this Giving Tuesday to support the festival and the programming you love. You can give online at WFAE.org, via Venmo at WFAE Radio, and you can donate cryptocurrency by searching WFAE at the Giving Block. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our host for this session, Brian Baltashevitz. Brian has been producing audio content on the internet since 2001 and has spoken about podcasting and the power of local on the national stage at PodFest in March 2020 and the PodFest Local Conference in August of 2020. He also serves as the director of the Carolina School of Broadcasting. His book, The Podcast Pep Talk, can be found at Amazon.com. Brian, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. And hi, everyone. Welcome to day number one of the first evening of this pop-up festival. We're very, very happy to have you here. Again, my name is Brian. I'm with the Queen City Podcast Network here in Charlotte. And I'm excited about tonight's event because it's what we do. It's what we do every single day. We record audio. And so we want to make sure that you are set. If you're a beginning podcaster and kind of have questions about, what kind of equipment do you need, or do I even really need fancy equipment? Or if you're an experienced podcaster, maybe kind of looking to upgrade your own equipment or kind of looking to see what kind of things you need to improve your sound, we are very, very happy to be sort of offering you some guidance in that area. I want to mention before we introduce our main speaker tonight, if you do have any questions, use the Q&A for your questions, and they'll be forwarded on to me, and we'll take your questions kind of all along the way through the event. We want kind of a loose structure. We want you to be able to get your question answered kind of as much as possible as they come up. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you here tonight for this second segment for the 2021 Charlotte Podcast Festival, a longtime Charlotte podcast producer and my friend, Andy Go. He's the owner and founder of Gojo Studios, and we're very, very happy to have Andy with us today. Andy, what's going on?
Hey, Brian, feeling good. Looking forward to the rest of this podcast festival. Grateful for WFAE and for you to have me on here and ready to get things rolling.
All right. So the first thing, I want to start kind of at step one, right? So you can have the fanciest equipment, you can have the best editing software, the best audio processing equipment, but if you're not recording in a place that's kind of conducive to providing you with quality audio, it really kind of starts there, doesn't it?
You're exactly right, Brian. The thing about podcasting is that we do want to have the best quality sound that's possible, but we also don't need to have a $1,000 Neumann microphone. We don't need to have the very best podcast studios to be able to make our podcast happen. We don't need any of that other stuff. Really, we can take the less expensive gear and material and make it sound just as good as any of the really expensive stuff. But as you said, the key starts with, first of all, having the right acoustics in the room that you're recording in. For instance, just a general look at sound. Sound is vibration, right? Anytime we speak or clap our hands or anything like that, it makes vibrations pass throughout the air. And when you're in a place that slows those vibrations down, generally with curtains or with carpets or stuff to absorb the sound, that's what produces that warm, rich, very authentic sound that we really want to hear. Now, if you're in a place that has, more that allows those vibrations to bounce around more. So for instance, you've got hard, flat walls, maybe glass walls, wood floors, things like that. That's going to make those vibrations bounce around a lot more harshly. And that results in kind of the thin, tinny sound that you get that we really want to kind of avoid. So again, it doesn't matter what kind of microphone you're using. If you're using it in the wrong environment, it's not going to sound great. And if you're using it correctly with just a little bit of acoustics and some microphone technique, you can make it sound great.
Yeah, your environment absolutely does make a difference in terms of, a lot of vertical hard surfaces and things like that will make a difference, but also just the general environment where you're recording. I had a client who shall remain nameless at this point, but they recorded a podcast literally in a boathouse. And there was a boat and there were little waves, and you could hear through the entire recording the lapping of the waves on the side of the boat. And they said, well, can you remove that? And well, no, not really. It's difficult to remove a sound like that through processing and things like that without affecting the bulk of the recording itself. So the environment where you're recording absolutely does make a difference. So let's kind of start then from there and kind of move out a little bit. So let's talk about the microphone first. So you can have your microphone, it can be a highly professional microphone, or the microphone, maybe even the one that's already built into your laptop, might actually serve its purpose just as well too, depending on what your goal is for your own podcast. Andy, can you talk a little bit about how your podcast and what your intention of your podcast, how that affects what kind of equipment you might be interested in obtaining?
Sure. Well, I think the number one thing that's kind of affected how people produce podcasts over the past 2 years has obviously been the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of people would want to record in person in studios or in offices and things like that. And these days, it's more likely that you're going to be recording remotely via Zoom or via Squadcast or some other sort of remote recording way. And so one of the things I think is most necessary for podcasters to be able to do is or to have in their recording repertoire is just a simple USB microphone. Most microphones like this Shure SM7B that I'm using here have an XLR input, and that's a traditional microphone cable, which doesn't, that sort of input doesn't exist on most computers, or on any computers, I should say. So if you wanted to use a traditional microphone like this one with your computer, you'd have to have some sort of digital interface with it, which you could certainly buy, but that's an extra expense that you really don't need if you start with, say, a good USB microphone. A good USB microphone like the Samson Q2U can be found on Amazon for about $65. It plugs directly into the USB port in your computer or other device, and that way you're recording right into your computer without having to use an interface. And of course, it also has the XLR input, so you can use it with more traditional mixers as well. So for a lot of people, who are recording podcasts right now, you're going to be recording your interviews remotely, like we are kind of doing right now via Zoom. And so that actually kind of takes a little bit of pressure off the gear that you need, because if all you have is just a good USB microphone, or at least a microphone with a digital interface, that's going to be as much as you need to record.
Yeah, let's we've got a question from the group. Dick Richardson has a question, and this is actually taking a step backwards now, asking about the environment. He says, how do I test my environment for quality?
How do you test your environment for quality? Honestly, one of the easiest ways to do that is to just walk into a room and just say, a couple of words out loud. whenever I try to work with my clients and they show me where they're going to be recording, one of the things I do is I just step into a room and just say like, hey, or shout, or some other, hard percussive words, because then it's, you can actually hear it when you record, or when you are saying these things, you can hear kind of the reverberations or the echoes in what you're saying out loud in a room. It might take a few times to do this, and if you try it in different places, you might kind of see what I'm talking about. But if you do it in a nice acoustically sound room, if you just walk into the room and just throw a couple of words out there at a pretty loud voice, you'll be able to hear how that sound plays off the walls and back into your own ears. And chances are, if it sounds real metallic and real thin in your ears, just without any sort of amplification like that, it's probably going to sound like that on tape too. I hear this all the time in studios or meeting rooms with glass walls. A lot of offices will use their conference room, which might look real nice and have this fancy glass wall that is very, very friendly to look at, but it's not really great for acoustics. So the easiest way that I can say is just to walk into a space, just kind of give it a little yelp, and if you hear significant feedback, it's probably not good. But again, chances are you're probably okay if you don't hear anything too crazy. Podcasting is very DIY, and while we'd all love to have the best NPR level sound quality possible, it's not usually possible, and therefore it's not something that we really need to strive after, is that perfection. Most of the time you're going to be good with with good acoustics, good microphone technique, and that's it.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about microphone technique in a minute, but I also think a good thing to think about, Dick, is when you walk into a room, kind of pay attention to the environment around you too. Pay attention to what's going on. Is somebody running a vacuum cleaner in the room next door? Is there construction going on upstairs? In the video world, we do site surveys. So we'll go out to a location a week or so in advance, maybe a day in advance, and just kind of take a look around, see where the outlets are. Do we have access to power? What's the lighting like? Now, obviously that's for video, but it also applies to audio as well. So what are there fluorescent lights? Fluorescent lights will give off a hum that sometimes you can't necessarily hear when you just walk into the room, but your microphones or your other electronics might pick up that hum, and that might be something you'll have to deal with in post-production. So really just kind of, if you have the opportunity to go into the room ahead of time, to Andy's point, check it out. I'll walk into a room and just clap my hands and see what the reverberation is like. It never hurts just to kind of really ideally walk into a room that you can take control of for that amount of time that you're going to be editing in there. So I hope that answers your question. One other quick question from Angie. She asks, if you want good background soundtracks, what do you recommend? Recording it separately with no one speaking, like suppose you want seagulls and lapping waves against the side of the boat. What would be your suggestion to add that sort of ambiance to your recording?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me, I think I'm getting a couple of comments here in the chat about my sound, ironically enough, because we're here to talk about good sound. And I think I switched over to the microphone input. So my apologies, everyone, if that was the case before, but I guess that goes to show you just how easily it is to, to have the right gear, but not have the right setting in place. So thank you to those y'all for pointing that out. So, yes, if somebody is looking to add some sort of ambient sound to their production, then it probably is, if you have the capacity to do it, better to go out and record that stuff separately. Because then, of course, you can take that audio and mix it into your DAW, your digital audio workstation, and then manipulate it from there. And to Brian's point earlier, if you wanted the sound of the sea waves lapping against the beach in the background of your podcast, maybe you can just go and record that out at a beach. Get some B-roll with a recorder out at a beach or wherever the place is, and then mix that into the sound together. If you try to do that during your actual recording of your podcast, the sound of the waves is inseparable from the sound of the person speaking. And so that can make it really hard to manipulate in the back end. And if there's places where the waves are, for instance, more loud than this person speaking, you can't really edit that out. But if you have one separate track of the person speaking, one separate track of whatever ambient sound that you want, then you can control the levels in your DAW, your digital audio workstation, and control it from there. So for me personally, just real quick, I'll talk about some of the gear that I like to use when I'm capturing ambient sound, because I do like to go out and capture sound of just, people on the streets or either the natural environment and whatever. And what I really like to use a lot is this Zoom H4n, which, Brian, I'm sure you're familiar with these a million times over. But these are really cool little devices that are very portable. They work with a little SD card. They even have these microphones on top, which you can actually record with. And this device is actually all you would need to record. You could actually, just using this by itself, record great audio of, an engine rumbling or, whatever, to get that sort of background sound. So just a small little device like this is really helpful when it comes to that.
Those Zoom recorders also, I think they're up to model number 6 or number 7 or something like that in the Zooms. But the good news about that is that you can get a model 2 or 3 dirt cheap. So like, a model 6 or 7 might cost you $400, but a model 2 might cost you about $200. And honestly, depending on your use and kind of what you need out of it, the 2 sounds just as good as the 6. So, look around. Maybe you can get a used one. You can go to B&H or even Amazon and find yourself a model 2 or 3 for a third of the price that you would pay for the brand new one. So it kind of depends on your budget as well. So let's Andy, briefly touch on remote recording. We've all had to become really good at remote recording, and especially over the last obviously 18 months. And like initially right out of the gate when the quarantine, when the lockdown first started, everybody, Zoom was perfectly positioned for things like this. I gotta believe the people at Skype are really upset about that, because I felt like they were positioned and then Zoom kind of moved into place. And Zoom was okay out of the gate because it was really kind of the only option. But Zoom is Zoom. There are other things that, other remote recording methods. You can record phone calls. You can use platforms like Squadcast or Riverside to record. You can certainly continue to use Zoom, but as far as remote recording, what have you found to be the best solution for recording with people remotely?
Well, you're right, Brian. This pandemic has certainly shifted the way that we record our podcast. So being able to record remotely is a necessity. And I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon, even as we sort of transition into life after, or, with this pandemic in our lives, just in general, we're always going to be able to need to record remotely. And I think that as far as what I've seen success in, honestly, I use Zoom a lot. I won't lie. I use Zoom a lot, and I have my clients use Zoom a lot just because at this point in the pandemic, most people are used to Zoom. And it's not going to be throwing them a curveball if you send them a Zoom link. And I think that's one of the most important things really about recording, not only in person, but remotely too, is keeping people in their sort of, zone of comfort, and not asking people to get too out of their element, because the more comfortable people can be, the better a conversation you're going to have. If you're trying to get somebody to download new software to try and record their podcast with, it's going to be a little bit more of an ask, right? So Zoom is typically something that works pretty well. I've found you can record your conversations in the free version of the software, and again, like I said, it's not going to trick people if you send them a link. Now, I would say that if you're looking at other software, the two that you mentioned, Riverside FM and Squadcaster, would both be right up there as like my top two alternatives to Zoom. Riverside FM in particular, I think, is really strong, and that's something that you can rely on pretty much the whole time. But when you're recording remotely, I think it really kind of comes down to not the service that you're using, but again, the things that you do to create a good environment for you and your guest when it comes to, first of all, your internet connection. And you got to think about this with both sides. You've got to have good gear. You've got to have good internet connection. A solid internet connection is probably going to be more valuable than your gear at the end of the day. If you have a wired internet connection, I've found that actually makes a huge difference. And if your guest can have a wired internet connection, that would be really good too. Back to Brian's point, if your guest is recording somewhere where they have a sketchy internet connection, it's not going to work so well, no matter how good their recording gear is. I would say that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But as far as recording remotely, having good gear, having good internet connection is good. And then also creating good environment to have the conversation is going to be really important too. And one of the things that I think I see most with my clients and with people that I work with is not turning off your notifications when you record. I see it all the time. And Brian, you know this, right? You'll get tape from somebody and there'll be just, notifications, pings going off left and right in a recording. And again, as your podcast producer, as your editor, you can't really take that out, without kind of making the audio sound kind of wonky. So not having any other distractions and turning off your notifications is also a really important thing. And then after that, the only other things I would say are really to really get together with your guest and go over kind of some of the things that you were going to want us to talk about during your conversation. I always love to have a pre-conversation, pre-recording chat where, we don't dive all the way into the topics that we're talking about, but we do go over like, hey, what are some of the through lines in the conversation going to be? What are some of the topics that we're going to mention? Is there anything that you don't want to talk about? When you go over that with your guest beforehand, that really gives them, the peace of mind of knowing that they know exactly what to expect from this conversation. They might be able to prepare their best anecdote or their best story for their conversation. I found that works more in your favor more often than not when recording. So to me, it's less about the service that you use and more about just doing those small personal little touches to make sure that that person, has what they need to be able to record and that they're comfortable going into your conversation.
Yeah, it's good stuff, Andy. We've had initially, like I think I mentioned, when the lockdown started, we had some reasonable success with Zoom. And then I think everybody started using Zoom. And so I don't know if something happened with the workload that Zoom was able to take on or something, but Zoom kind of really dropped off a cliff. And so we were kind of left without a reliable remote recording platform. And so we've used both Riverside and Squadcast, and we're actually about to enter it into a partnership with the folks at Squadcast. So it's, we've really kind of landed on both of those, and the way that those two platforms work, and this is really, really smart. And I wish I understood the tech behind it. So say that Andy and I are recording a podcast episode, obviously remotely. He's in his house, I'm in my house. Riverside and Squadcast both record our own audio and video onto our own computers. So I'm on an iMac. I get an audio file and a pristine video file that's recorded in my own environment through my own equipment, not over the internet. So it's not recording what you're hearing me say. It's recording what's actually happening in my house, as it were. And it records Andy's audio and video, in his house, onto his own computer system, whether it's his laptop or computer or whatever. And I want to say that Riverside just launched an app as well, I believe, to record it onto the thing. So onto a smartphone. So at the end of the recording, you hit stop and each of those platforms will send those pristine files up to the cloud, and then you can download those files off of the cloud. Everything's in a separate track, and then you can insert it into your editing software and edit it as if live, right? So both of the tracks are the same length. You just match up the tracks and do the editing, and it sounds very much like everyone's in the same room. Of course, there's a cost to this. I want to say we're at about $15 a month for Squadcast, and it's relatively inexpensive, and tends to work really well. So really, I can't recommend Riverside or Squadcast highly enough. I'm in place with Zoom. We have not had very good success with Zoom, and so we were really kind of desperate to find another platform, and those two both stepped up for us. They're both a .fm website, so riverside.fm and squadcast.fm. Now, I will say this, though, you are still very much at the mercy of your guest's internet service. So Natasha had a question. A lot of her guests tend to be international and lack access to good Wi-Fi and equipment. So she sounds super clear, but their sound can be off. Any tips for improving sound quality on their end? Andy? You want to take that one?
Wow. Yeah, you leave me with a tough question there, Brian, for sure. No, that's a great question, though, and it's a valid question. But the answer really is you're kind of up to the mercy of what the person on the other end of you is using. And again, that's why, first of all, the one place that you want to start is making sure that your own audio sounds good, because if you're listening to tape and one person in the conversation sounds nice and clear, and the other person maybe sounds a little bit sketch, that's better than both people sounding sketch, right? So at the very least, you can control your audio, make sure that you're getting good tape yourself. That's your number one sort of thing. And then with the other person, you're kind of limited to what they have that they're working with. It would be great if they had a wired internet connection and like super fast download speeds, upload speeds. It would be great if they had this nice expensive microphone here in a very acoustically sound environment. But that's the reality of that situation, is that it's just not the case. You really have to kind of rely on what people have, which makes it even more important, again, with what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, that you really prep your guest on what you need from them. And a lot of people, particularly new podcasters or people who just aren't used to speaking on microphones, just aren't going to be able to think. They're just not going to be thinking of things like, oh, I shouldn't be recording while, the HVAC's on in the room, or wow, I shouldn't be, recording with, the built-in microphone in my computer, which, by the way, as y'all can tell, sounds really not nearly in the same ballpark as this nice Shure SM7B here. So even though you might not be able to control that, you can still give people heads up ahead of time about some of the simple things that you'll need: recording in a quiet place, trying to get a nice USB microphone if they have one. If not, earbuds or something like that. That's at least a little bit better than the built-in mic, and just prepping them on stuff like that. I've heard of some podcasters that will actually buy a USB microphone and ship it out to their guests so that they can record with a nice quality USB microphone, which you can certainly do. Of course, it's a lot of legwork in shipping it and then having them send it back to you and all that sort of stuff. But that is an option that you have as well. The last thing that I would say on that is, if your person on the other end of the line does have like some decent recording stuff, or at least a good recording situation, and but the only thing that's missing is a good internet connection, you can do kind of what Riverside does and Squadcast do, which is to record a local line level input from both ends, and then take those two recordings and then sync them together in your post-production. So for instance, if I was talking to Brian and we were both at the same time while we're recording our Zoom conversation or whatever, if we were recording our line level inputs in, say, a GarageBand or an Audacity, we could just take those audio clips, one that has just me in it and one that has just Brian in it, and then combine them together to make one audio clip that literally will sound like you're in the same room, because you're recording on your line level local inputs too. So that's also an option too, which, yes, it requires more work, but I'll tell you what, the sound is quite fantastic if you can do it.
Yeah. even at the very least, if your if your interview subject has a pair of like the Apple earbuds with the little microphone on the cord, even at the very least, that will sound better than not having anything. So at the very least, see if your subject at least has those earbuds, because that will sound better than kind of the ambient noise coming from the microphone built in into their computer.
If I could real quick, Brian.
Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got this is a Samsung Q2U. This is what I use for USB remote recordings. And like I said, it's just super simple. It's $65 on Amazon. You can see it's small, it's portable, it's handheld. If you're speaking into one of these as opposed to your built-in microphone, it's going to sound worlds better. Just like, how it sounded earlier when I was speaking on my built-in mic. It sounds totally different. And then as you can see here on the end, it's got the XLR input right here, the one with the 3 prongs, but it's also got this little mini USB right here and comes with both cables, of course, so you can connect it straight to your computer. Again, if you use that, or if your guest has it, or if you want to send something like that to your guest, that will like really, really step out the sound quality game for either person using it.
Yeah. Excellent suggestion from Shireen Stanford. If people have bad Wi-Fi, or a guest has another sort of recording issue on their end, she said good luck with having people record themselves as a backup on their phones. iPhones actually record decent audio, which is absolutely true. Some people also have done recordings on QuickTime, and then they email that to us, and then they edit them together. So that's a great solution. Good idea. All right, so we've got a couple questions about on the video podcast. We kind of want to make sure that we stay on track here. So but we could talk all night about video podcasts, but we definitely want to kind of stay on track as far as answering audio equipment questions. So Dick, I do see your question. We'll give you contact information at the end of this, and you can reach out to Andy or I if you want to, and we'll be happy to address some of your other questions via email if that works out for you guys. So here's Dana asks, sometimes the sound over Zoom isn't great, especially if the person you're interviewing does not have a microphone, which we've kind of talked about. But her question is actually, do you have any suggestions for minimizing echoes and making sound better? So as you know, in Zoom, if you're not listening through headphones or earbuds, your microphone in the room with you is going to pick up everybody's audio. And of course, it's over the internet, so there's a bit of a delay. And Andy, I know I'm shaking your head. It's absolutely imperative that whoever you're talking with has headphones or earbuds to listen to eliminate that sort of feedback. Really, all that you're hearing is feedback, but it's not necessarily powerful enough or loud enough to create what we normally think of as feedback. But that echo is really just the audio from your speakers on your computer, which, for me are like right here, right? And then the audio from your speakers is coming right back into your microphone on a delay. So you're hearing everybody on about a, quarter of a second delay. And that's going to cause some problems as well. And it's going to make your podcast kind of unlistenable, right? People will forgive a lot of things with a podcast, but they've got to be able to hear what you and your guests have to say. So make sure, it's very important, 100%. If you don't take anything else from this hour, make sure that everybody involved in the recording of your podcast has headphones or earbuds. Andy, do you want to weigh in or back me up on that? I'm guessing you do.
Oh, I'll back you up 1000% on that one, Brian. I mean, it's an often overlooked piece of the podcasting pie is your headphones, but they are super, super important. And the reason is because it doesn't really matter what your audio sounds like when you're just speaking and you're hearing it through just your naked ears, because that's not what goes on tape, right? What goes on tape is actually what gets recorded. And the only way you can tell what that sound is by listening to it through a good set of over-the-ear headphones or studio monitors. And in fact, that's why they're called monitors, is because they allow you to monitor the quality of the audio that you're getting through your recording. So for instance, and I hear this all the time, or I see this all the time with new podcasters, if you get off mic, by the way, this goes back to a microphone technique thing, which we haven't really talked about much, but if you get off mic and let's say I'm in a conversation and somebody over here to my left asks me a question and I turn my head all the way this way and answer that question, you can see, or you can hear how my voice almost completely drops out of the mix there. And if you didn't have your headphones on, you wouldn't be able to tell that that was the case, for the guest in particular. If you don't have your headphones on, you can't tell that you have your voice completely dropping out of the mix, or maybe there's some distortion from an HVAC or something like that. So a good set of headphones is super key. And the good thing about that is that when I say a good set of headphones, I mean 30, $25, $35, $45 on Amazon. Totally perfect. I've recommended plenty of those. I can find some links later if we want to send to those. These headphones that I'm using are a really nice pair of Shure headphones that I think are retail for about $100. So a little bit nicer, but you don't need anything, any more particular than that. It's really, again, just about being able to hear the tape that you're recording and making sure that it's good quality sounding tape and that your guest can tell that they're recording good quality sounding tape too. And if I could, let me just go back to my handy, exhibit A here, my Samsung Q2U again that I've been recommending. One of the other things that I have to point out is right there, right? That's a little 3.5 millimeter 1/8 inch plug, or that's what accepts a headphone cable or an aux cable, if you will. And so this microphone is designed to be able to plug in your headphone right into the bottom of the microphone, and then that way, whenever you're recording your Zoom call, you can select both the input and the output to be on the microphone, and that way it's running the signal just through the microphone and just through the headphones, completely eliminating any distortion or feedback or reverb that you might get by, again, what Brian was talking about. If you're using the built-in speakers and the built-in microphone, all that sound's going to kind of interact with each other and not sound very good. So all that can be avoided and cleaned up with a good set of over-the-ear headphones.
Yeah, that's a must-have. Mario's been using Zoom for ease with scheduling and then using Memo on phones as a second recording source for guests. Any smartphone trick recommendations? Not all guests have good Wi-Fi or microphones. So tricks for smartphone recording to improve quality, Andy?
As in recording on your actual smartphone or? Yeah. Oh, okay. I generally don't record directly onto the smartphone. If I'm recording on Zoom, I would, record to the cloud and then pull that audio off. I don't really record much on my mobile devices, so I don't think I have a particularly good answer for this one.
Yeah, we have done it in a pinch. There are, I've got a shoulder bag that I carry around with me almost everywhere. That has all kinds of different audio equipment in it because I'm that dork. But
same place.
there are lavalier microphones that you can buy for smartphones with the right, the newest Apple iPhones have that weird tab insert in the end. You can buy a lavalier microphone with that tab on it that will plug in, or there's even handheld microphones and things like that. So check out Amazon, search for iPhone external microphones, and they're not terribly expensive either. I think I picked up an iPhone lavalier for about $12. So they're not super expensive, and they will improve the audio quality. Now, having said that, I've also recorded a podcast before when everyone was in the same room with the smartphone, just laying the smartphone on the table in front of us. There were 3 of us involved in the podcast, laying the phone on the table in front of us and just kind of making sure that everybody was kind of, snugged up to the table. But that will work well in a pinch as well. So if things come up, and go, oh, I've wanted to talk to this guy for a while. You happen to see somebody out somewhere and you say, hey, can you give me 10 or 20 minutes? Your smartphone is a perfectly reasonable solution for something kind of on the fly like that. So, but again, look for external microphones for smartphones on Amazon, and that's a good solution as well. I don't know that you can find. I know we keep pimping Amazon. I'm trying to think of local audio equipment suppliers. Guitar Center maybe, but I can't think of anywhere else that might have
it's tough those, because you
yeah.
need really specific cables sometimes, and like you just can't count on Guitar Center to have them, and generally Amazon is less expensive too, I've found. So it's tough, but those devices work. And just real quick, iRig is one that I used to use as well. The iRig brand sells like a couple of different microphones that are meant to be plugged directly into your iPhone or your smartphone. And again, having something rather than nothing is always going to be better. Having some sort of microphone that you can use besides the built-in one. Built-in one is good, again, if you have the right acoustics. But if you can get just a good iRig microphone, which I think is $50-ish on Amazon, that's really going to help you out. And then I think I see somebody asking about what program to record on with a smartphone. I usually just record either with the voice memo or into GarageBand. But again, all I'm trying to do with that would be just to capture the sound itself so that I can then send it to my DAW, my digital audio workstation, and then manipulate it from there. I'm probably not doing any editing on my phone or anything like that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I haven't done that as well. GarageBand, I have not found GarageBand to be particularly friendly. So we have that. We're going to talk about editing in a few minutes. I know we've had a few questions about that. A couple of suggestions. B&H is a good source for equipment. Also Sweetwater. And you can see there are some links that are kind of popping up.
I'll throw a plug out
chat there too. Yeah.
I'll throw a plug out for BSW, Broadcast Supply Worldwide. I work with those guys, and they are really good about getting stuff to you very quickly, and good prices as well.
All right. So you've recorded audio. Hopefully it's the best quality you can. You've recorded it in a nice, quiet place, and you've got what you want. Now what, Andy? What's your next step equipment-wise? So let's talk about editing software.
Sure. Well, so editing software is, it depends on where you're starting off with your editing. If you're starting from scratch, then you don't want to probably invest in some of the higher end materials like a Pro Tools or something like that. If you're starting from scratch and you're wanting to edit your audio, the two pieces of software I would recommend are Audacity, which is a free download for Mac or PC. Audacity is really what I like to use to record my raw audio with, because it's really simple. It's a very easy to use piece of software. It's open source, and it just really does a good job of just recording the audio itself. Go ahead.
I was just going to back you up on Audacity. It's a really, really powerful piece of software, and it's free. So yeah, Audacity is a great solution. The learning curve is a little steep, but once you get the hang of it, it's a very, very good free piece of software that you should probably be using.
Yeah, and you can't beat free. You really can't beat free, especially in this industry. I mean, podcasting in general is pretty affordable, relatively speaking, to especially to stuff like video. But hey, it still costs a lot of money for certain things. So if you can get the job done for free, that's really good. So Audacity is one, and then I would also, of course, mention GarageBand. GarageBand on a Mac, I think, is a great way to get started with mixing and mastering a podcast. And when I say mixing and mastering, what I mean is, taking the different audio regions, moving them around, adding the voiceovers, adding music beds, fade ins, fade outs, things like that. What really makes the podcast a production, that sort of stuff. If you have a Mac, you can, use GarageBand. If it's probably already loaded on your computer. If not, it's a free download. Now, if you don't have a Mac, unfortunately, there's no free version or free equivalent of that on PC, to my knowledge. There's a lot of softwares that will work, but they maybe are just on a trial basis or a very limited sort of basis. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer there. And then the last piece of software that I usually like to mention is what I use, which is Adobe Audition. And Brian, obviously, I know you teach Adobe Audition at Carolina School of Broadcasting as well. So it's a great piece of software. It's very professional. It's designed to edit audio and dialogue-based pieces of audio, like for radio and for podcasting. And I think it's really just a fantastic piece of software. The only problem is that it's a little expensive, because if you don't have a subscription already to the Adobe suite, then it can be anywhere from 20 to 50 to maybe more a month, $20 to $50 a month for the subscription. But also a lot of places I know do have existing subscriptions to the Adobe suite. So maybe your school, your work, something like that might already have access to it, which I've noticed a lot from my clients as well. So Adobe Audition, if you're really serious about learning your editing and trying to make it sound its best and getting the best workflow, that's the one for you.
Yeah, Adobe, like all the Adobe products, to Andy's point, the learning curve is a little bit steep. But if you're sort of familiar with the Adobe platforms and the Adobe software, you'll pick up on Audition pretty quickly. So say you're familiar with Premiere or After Effects, they're somewhat similar. Some of the keystrokes and things are different if you're a keyboard editor, but Adobe Audition is what we work with almost exclusively at the network. And Adobe, I think just recently, made the elements of the Adobe Creative Suite available a la carte. So you can get like Audition for $20 a month. But you also get the entire Adobe Creative Suite for, I believe we're paying $57 a month right now, which, over the course of a year. But we also use, because we do some video production too with our production company, we use After Effects and Premiere and 3D modeling and animation and things like that. So, it makes sense for us to kind of bundle Audition. But if you're only producing a podcast, then that $20 a month for Audition might be worth it for you. Audition also has a really robust noise removal system and EQ system. So really, the difference between maybe Audacity and Audition is the ability to clean up audio effectively that may come in with a little bit of background noise or a little fuzz in it, or a little hum. So you're really, editing is editing. It's in points and out points and the decisions that you're making. But where Audition really excels and becomes worth the price of admission is in their kind of noise canceling and the ability to clean up audio. A lot of podcasters that I talk to and people kind of up and coming like to use Hindenburg. I've never actually laid hands on Hindenburg. I've never used it, but I hear it's very user friendly. Andy, I think you've got a little bit of experience with Hindenburg.
Just a small amount. I've actually never had it installed on any of my machines, but I've used it at a couple of trade shows and expo halls, and it actually is something that it would be one of my top dive-ins after GarageBand and Adobe Audition and such, because it is also designed to make the audio engineering experience very simple, straightforward, and not a technical undertaking like perhaps an Adobe Audition would be. It's made for people who, have a couple of pieces of audio, want to put them together, put in a quick music bed, put in a few quick transitions, and boom, pop it out like that. So Hindenburg's really solid in the few times that I've used it, because it's very intuitive, very user-friendly. I would say it's also from that perspective on the same level as GarageBand in being easy to use, easy to figure out, and just like it's geared towards just letting you do the thing that you want to do, instead of requiring you to know a lot about how to do it. So even though I haven't used it much myself, I will give a plug for it.
Yeah. Terrible named product, but a solid product that I've heard really kind of nothing but good things from the podcasters I've talked to who use Hindenburg. I have I have a joke I normally use about Hindenburg, but I think for this one I'll keep it to myself. Rini wants to know, Andy, what's the best way to learn editing?
Man, the best way, I hate to say it, but there's no other way around it than just to do it, and to make a lot of mistakes, and to have to clean up those mistakes as much as possible. There's no way to get around having to learn how to cut out ums or ahs, or having to reorder sections of a conversation, or having to noise reduce a certain section, or remove somebody's cell phone beeping in the middle of a conversation, until you just go out and do that. There are, of course, great resources available on YouTube. YouTube University is always a great place to look. If you're using Adobe Audition, one of the best places that I learned was just the built-in tutorials that Adobe Audition includes. I think I finished the tutorial section there in like less than a few hours, and I felt like I had almost everything that I needed to find from that point on out. I can't say that there's a silver bullet answer to that. I would start with software like GarageBand and Audacity. That's kind of easy to get the hang of. Start recording a bunch of conversations, start trying to clean them up, start trying to train your ear to hear where filler is, where you remove certain parts of the conversation, start trying to cut those pieces together, start trying to add music and music beds to it. And that's going to be it. Like, that's going to be the best way to be able to get it done. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, the best way to learn how to edit is to edit. You can look at all the tutorials and all the YouTube videos and things like that, that you can find. But editing it's really kind of two-parted, right? It's the physical act of editing and cutting, making your in points and out points, but it's also the decisions that you're making as you produce a podcast. What do you keep in? What do you take out? Do you take out, what's the difference between an that is just kind of filler, and an that's actually an emotional part of a person's response to a question. A lot of people think that ums are just filler. Well, an if you're asking a particularly dramatic question in that moment, then that or that 3 or 4 seconds of silence is as effective and as important a part of that person's response as the words that they're actually saying. So you can really you can kind of go overboard in the editing. So it's the decisions that you're making as well as the physical act of editing, and ultimately editing is in points and out points and making those decisions.
If I could, Brian, I would love to make one other point about how the relationship between recording audio and then post-production works. And that is that no matter how good you are at post-production, there's some things that you just can't do, or are going to be really difficult to do in post-production, that aren't a problem if you just get good tape in the first place. So that's something to always think about, is that there's a limit to how much you can do, especially if you're just learning audio production in general. There is a limit to how much you can polish up a piece of tape if it's not very well recorded in the first place. So if you're recording somebody on Zoom and their internet connection is sketchy, and it's doing that thing where it's stretching their words out, and there's almost nothing you can do in Adobe Audition to clean that up. I don't know, Brian, if you have anything, but I don't know, unless you just spent literal hours and hours just trying to stitch that together, it's not going to work. it's going to be a much easier, and it's going to save you so much time, no matter if you're just a beginner or an experienced pro, to get really good tape when you're in the space, when you're recording something. And then you have minimal stuff to do on the back end when you're, cleaning it up. It's so much easier to do it that way than just to try and get whatever tape you can and then clean it up on the back end, because there's no guarantee that you can clean some stuff up with the audio engineering side of things.
Yeah, I spent 28 years in broadcasting, and everyone has kind of heard that phrase like, oh, we'll fix it in post, which
Yeah,
means,
exactly.
whatever we get, now we'll get into post-production and we'll fix it. Well, filmmakers and broadcasters actually use that now as a joke. Oh, we'll just, we'll fix that later. That'll be someone else's problem. You've got to have quality source material. Otherwise, either you're going to spend hours trying to fix it and it's still not going to meet the quality that you want, or you're going to end up with a lower quality product because of something that happened early. So it's a very important part of the process. To Andy's point, take every step that you possibly can to make sure that what you're gathering, the sound that you're gathering, is quality and good, and then that's just going to make the post-production process that much easier.
Right, and that goes for not just the quality of the sound, like the acoustics and the whatnot, the good microphone technique, but again, having those conversations with your guest beforehand to go over what is going to be covered during your conversation, or taking those small little steps to make sure that they're comfortable when you're recording that conversation. That also produces good tape too, right? Because then you're less likely to have filler words or filler comments or stuff that you have to take out of the final recording as well. So when I say getting good tape, it's not just about capturing it with a good microphone, but it's also about, doing all those little steps that lead up to putting your guest in a place where they deliver good quality answers in an efficient manner. So again, you have less to cut and less to stress over about in post.
Yeah. Let's see, we've got about Andy, 4 minutes left or so. Andy, it's gone by really fast. Try to pick up kind of bits and pieces of questions. We're kind of going to be skipping back and forth in our process here, but Andy, thoughts about using Anchor FM?
Anchor
from Jakeem. Yeah.
Yeah, so Anchor is a all-in-one podcasting app that you can download for free on iOS or Android. And what it allows you to do is record, edit, and publish your podcast straight from the app, and all for free. It's owned by Spotify. It was bought by Spotify, I think, about 2 years ago. And it's a great app. It's a fantastic app for somebody who wants to get started in podcasting and who just doesn't want to worry about a lot of the back end stuff, just wants to record something, put some music to it, and put it out there. Definitely, Anchor is a great way to be able to start. I generally move my clients and the people that I work with away from Anchor, because on other hosting platforms like Libsyn or Captivate or Podbean, I think you ultimately have more control and more ownership over your product, which are really important in the long run. And so that's why I push people towards other platforms. But if you just want to record something and get the hang of finding your own voice and putting something out there and having it be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everything else, no reason why you shouldn't start with Anchor. You can always transfer your feeds later if you want to, but Anchor is a great way to be able to get started and to get your feet wet in the space. Again, I would say if you're a more dedicated production, or if you're doing this for a brand or company, you're going to want to have the ownership and control over your own material that the other sources provide later on. But still, great service, excellent way to get started in podcasting.
So last question, Brittany has a question. Great resources or videos, and I'm gonna expand her question a bit. Great resources / videos to learn the ins and outs of GarageBand. I would open that up to basically any editing software, whether it's Audacity, Audition, Hindenburg, or GarageBand. Great resources, videos. I think, personally, go to YouTube. There's a bajillion videos out there. Even for simple things like, how do I remove hiss from an audio file on Audition? Search for that on YouTube, and you're going to get probably 1,000 hits of 30-second videos of people telling you what buttons to push to remove that hiss. So YouTube, there was another, was it Lydia? That's another source for videos, tutorial videos. And then of course that software's own tutorial material as well. So there's an endless wealth of stuff out there. You don't need us to tell you how to edit. You can you can learn on your own on YouTube or any one of those places.
Yeah, I'll back that up. I will say that whenever I need to, so again, the person who asked, like, what's the best way to learn how to edit? And I said, like, just go out there and edit. Like, that's kind of what I do. I just go out there and I edit. I try to make something match whatever I hear in my head. And whenever I come across a function or something that I don't know how to do, the first thing I do is I just go onto Google and I type in exactly what I'm talking about. How do I remove hissing in Adobe Audition? And like Brian said, there's probably going to be several video clips or articles or whatever that'll pop up. I don't think I have any one favorite that I go to like more than the others. I just gravitate towards whichever ones have the answers to whatever I need in that moment. And that's really about it. There are some good tutorial and courses actually on Udemy, which I do want to give a quick plug out for the learning and software site Udemy. I've been taking a few of their courses, which cost anywhere from $15 to $35 or something like that usually. But I've been learning some how to use Logic Pro in that recently myself, and I've found their tutorials to actually be pretty helpful. So yeah, no video sites in particular, but Google and YouTube University are always going to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. And quickly, Andy, we got about a minute left. What's the one takeaway that you want people to walk away with tonight?
So podcasting is a very DIY sort of thing. We can, people everywhere all around the world are making podcasts with, just the very simple microphones that they have access to, which is really cool because it doesn't take, thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in gear to be able to podcast and get your voice out there. For $20 a month in hosting and $100 USB microphone, you can have your podcast available to anybody anywhere in the world. So I think that's just a really cool sort of thing. That availability that we have is just normal people to be able to put our voices out there like that with that sort of range. I'm really thankful for, because that's not something that the average person has always had access to. And while, sounding your best is important, you always want to make sure that you're representing yourself well, representing your guests well. Remember that the quality of the content is going to beat the quality of the sound. And as long as you're having good conversations, you're talking about interesting stuff, and you're having fun with what you're doing, and your audience can feel that, that's going to trump a little bit of imperfection in your sound quality any day. So, make sure you're having fun with it and having some good conversations, and that'll take you where you want to go.
All right, Andy, thanks a lot. Don't go away. I want to make sure that we mention that tomorrow's, which is day number 2 of this pop-up podcast festival, 3 sessions tomorrow. So check them out, charlottepodcastfestival.com. 3 sessions. The first one at 1:00 in the afternoon, digging for truth, investigative podcasting. So if you're looking to blow the lid off something, you're going to want to check out that one. That's at 1:00, charlottepodcastfestival.com. At 2:00, real talk, tackling the tough topics, how to talk about sensitive issues on your podcast. That's going to be great. And then also tomorrow night, 6 to 7 o'clock, build your podcast through branding and marketing. So, if a podcast is published but nobody listens, does it make a sound? That's the question. The podcasting is almost the easy part. The tough part afterwards is the relentless self-promotion. So we're going to talk about that, building your podcast through branding and the marketing. Of course, we want to thank Ortho Carolina for sponsoring this pop-up Charlotte Podcast Festival for 2021. It's 5 days of sessions. We're very excited about it. the partners in this podcast festival this year. WFAE, of course, 90.7. It's that time of year. It's Giving Tuesday. If you see it in your heart and you think that public radio is important, you can Venmo a donation at WFAE Radio or donate at WFAE.org. If you believe, like a lot of us, I think, do, that making voices heard is important, WFAE is a great place for your donation on this Giving Tuesday. Also, Eclex Creative Agency, they're a partner in all this. Blumenthal Performing Arts, thanks to them for making it possible. If we were able to meet in person, that would have been our venue, but we weren't able to do that. Hopefully next time. But thanks to the good folks at Blumenthal Performing Arts and Queen City Podcast Network as well, queencitypodcastnetwork.com. Andy, thanks so much for your time and insight. It was great seeing you for the first time in about a year and a half. It was fun hanging out with you. Thanks for your expertise.
It was my pleasure, Brian. And likewise, man, I'm so glad to see you. Glad to see you're doing well. And it was really fun to link up with you here for this great session to kick off WFE's podcast festival.
How can people find you if they've got further questions?
Well, my website is gojostudios.com, GOHJO studios.com. That's where you can find more information about Gojo Studios and the work that we do. You can email me, andy@gojo.com. And you could probably find me on Instagram too, @thegojo. That's always a fun place.
And you can find Queen City Podcast Network at queencitypodcastnetwork.com. If you have any further questions about all this, and you want to reach out to me, Brian at queencitypodcastnetwork.com. That's Brian with an I, BRIAN at queencitypodcastnetwork.com. So check out all the rest of events at charlottepodcastfestival.com. Thanks a lot to WFAE and all the folks for helping out. And we will see you for 3 big sessions tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.